This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gould.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. In this week's episode, I sit down and interview retired LAPD detective Dave Escoto. Dave was a detective for LAPD for many years. This guy really did it all, and he has some really great stories to share. He talks about using his humor as a weapon. He talks about a pretty funny situation with some Eastern European women from the 1984 Olympics. He tells a story about a time his partner saved his life and, tricking prostitutes while on the job. It's just a really fun, interesting interview. I had a really great time with it, and I think you're going to really enjoy it too. At the end of the interview, he has some really good advice for how he used to deal with just all the trauma and things that he saw on the job. So really good piece at the end. Dave is just a great guy. He's one of these guys that when you meet him, you're like, within 5 minutes, you're like, I want to party with this guy. I like this guy. So I know you guys are going to love him. Without further ado, here is Dave Escoto. Dave Escoto, thank you for coming on the podcast, my man.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it.
Could you just tell everybody in a nutshell, in a brief synopsis of your career, like who you worked for and where you started and just the positions you held?
Okay, 1981, I entered the LAPD Police Academy. I graduated January 82. I was sent to Rampart Division, where I was a boot, a rookie. I did my year there on patrol. From there, I went to jail division because they will you after you make probation. You either go to another division or communications or jail, and I was one of the lucky ones that went to jail.
Better than being a dispatcher?
Oh, gosh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, not as good as going to another division where you could work patrol, but, it was an experience.
Right.
That's the most fights I've ever been in was when I worked jail division.
Oh, I can only imagine, yeah.
And that's with the misdemeanor arrests. The felony guys, the murderers and everybody else, they were real cool and calm, and, they just said, hey, I did it, so I'm going to be okay. It's all the drunks and all the street people that are rowdy and getting fights with. But from there, I went to Wilshire Division. I stayed there, maybe 10 years, work patrol, vice, detective trainee. Back then, if you wanted to see what it was like to be a detective, they had a program where you could go work detectives as a trainee. And if you make detective, you have to make a detective within 3 years, or you get kicked out and sent back to patrol. So I ended up making detective, stayed at Wilshire, worked, I worked all the tables, homicide. I started in autos, worked burglary, robbery, sex crimes, then went to homicide. From there, I went to Foothill for about half a year. From there, I went to internal affairs for 3 years.
Oh, my God. You had a lot of different positions.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, internal affairs, that was kind of a fluke. I had no plans on working it, but a lieutenant I worked for knew I spoke Spanish and had homicide experience because I had worked homicides for, 7 years of my detective career. And he said, we got this case at internal affairs where this copper who is divorcing his wife, the wife's pretty upset, and she came to internal affairs and said that he killed 2 people before he became a cop. So the lieutenant came and asked me if I'd work the case on loan to internal affairs because the wife only spoke Spanish. I spoke Spanish. I worked homicide, so I went. It took me about 3 months, and I found both people alive, and that she said he killed. They were alive, and she was the one that was pretty vindictive.
Yeah, a woman's scorn, I guess.
Yeah. So, I cleared this guy, and then I ended up staying in internal affairs for another 2.5 years. Working the follow home team, which it's the undercover unit where if the accusations are serious enough, we'll put a team of undercover cops on the police officer and follow him around. So I was an investigator on that squad.
Wow. That's good for people to know that that's really the police themselves too,
Yeah, and in LAPD, well, most police, I guess all police departments take pride in, taking care of their own and, schooling their own and watching their own and weeding out the bad guys.
Right.
And then from there, internal affairs, I went to Van Nuys, went to homicide again, and then back to Wilshire where I ended up my career.
That's amazing, man. That's a big career. How many years was it total?
I did 30 years.
30 years. Wow.
23 years as a detective, and the first 7 years were patrol and vice. Oh yeah, I left that out. I worked vice for 2 years.
Oh man, you did it all.
Probably the best time I had ever on the job was working vice. That was a blast.
Can you dig deep and tell us about the first, like, really hot call you responded to as a young copper, like a call that really got your adrenaline going?
Yeah, I remember it vividly. I was probably 2 days out of the academy working Rampart Division, and Rampart was, very busy. Back then, Carter was president, and he let all the Cuban boat people in the United States, and Castro loaded the boats with his prisoners, and he sent over he cleared out his prisons, and he sent all the cons to the United States.
Wow. He saw the opportunity, and he was like, I'm going to clean my country up.
Yeah. And a lot of them ended up in Rampart Division, so it was nuts. And, lots of guns, lots of robberies, everything else. But my first intense call, was it was a 415 man, which, creating a disturbance. And
so 415 man means like a disorderly conduct type of thing? Or?
Yeah, disorderly conduct. And the wife had called it in and said she can't reason with him. He just got through smoking PCP. He's breaking up furniture and cut himself. He's bleeding. She's afraid he's going to die. His description was about 6'4", 250 pounds. We get the call, and my partner and I are rolling, and we get some backup because, if he's on PCP, we didn't want to handle it by ourselves. So I'm 2 days out of the academy just thinking, oh, man, here we go.
Right.
So we get there, all six of us, 6 coppers. We make a game plan, and it was in Echo Park, so it's pretty hilly. So a lot of the homes have a staircase leading up to the front door, and that's how this house was. So me being the guy with the least amount of time on the job, my partner said, "You're going first."
Oh man.
So, okay, so I'm starting to walk up these steps, and there was probably about 50 steps, wooden steps, and they're creaking as you're going up, and can't hear anything. Luckily, it was daylight, so I'm working my way up, and I keep looking back, and I can see the other 5 coppers behind me, so I know. So I'm thinking, okay, if I get in a fight, I might get my butt kicked a little bit, but we're going to win. So get up to the top, and here's this big guy, big white guy. He was probably 6'6", 260 pounds, just huge, just muscular. Looked like a ex-con.
Oh, man.
And he's sitting down, and he's covered in blood, and he looks up, and he looks at me, and he starts to stand up, and he goes, "I hate Mexicans."
Oh,
and
no.
I go, "So do I." He starts cracking. I mean, I'm Latino, as you know.
Right.
So he starts cracking up, and he bends down, he puts his hands on his knees as he's laughing. So I was able to grab his head and pull him on the ground, and we all swarmed him and was able to cuff him, and nobody got hurt. He didn't get hurt. Wife was happy. The house was a little messed up, but that was probably the most intense radio call I had, is just walking up those steps, not knowing, what I'm going to run into.
Oh, yeah. I mean, especially PCP,
yeah.
The stories from back in the day were like, people are flipping cars over by themselves on PCP.
Yeah, breaking handcuffs, and yeah, it was nuts. It
Damn.
was nuts, but yeah, it worked out.
I love that you diffused it with humor. That's great.
Yeah.
That's funny.
I didn't know what to, it just hit me. Just play with them. So.
Damn.
It was good. It worked out.
That's awesome. Dave, can you tell us about a strange or really bizarre call that you responded to in your career?
Yeah. My partner and I get a call, and this is really bizarre, and it kind of ties in with humor also. But we get a call. It's a welfare check. There's this 80-year-old woman that lives alone in her apartment, and her family's out of state, and they can't get a hold of her. And it's about 11 o'clock at night, and they said they couldn't get a hold of her for all day and all night, and they're worried about her. So, they call in a welfare check. So my partner and I get the call. We Go to the front door, start banging on it. No answer, no answer. So I'm thinking, oh, this poor gal's dead.
Right.
Going to be a DB call, dead body call. So we get the manager to let us in. The manager, we explain to him what we're doing. He unlocks the door, and not the deadbolt, but the chain lock was on. So we had to kick the door open. So we walk in, and down the hall we can see the bedroom, and we can see her bed's facing the hallway. So, and we could see the headboard, and we could see her lying in bed. So I'm thinking, gosh, she didn't hear us, she's dead, this and that. My partner says, well, go check her. I'm still a rookie, so I got to do the checking.
Right.
Just make sure she's okay and there's no foul play. So I walk up, and I'm looking at her, and I put my head down to see if she's breathing. And I'm going to see if I can get her pulse on her neck. And when my face is probably 12 inches from her face. All of a sudden, her eyes open. She looks at me, starts screaming. I start screaming. My partner's screaming. The manager's screaming. She couldn't hear. She was deaf. So, the poor gal was just sleeping, and we thought she was dead. And
scared the hell out of her.
Scared the hell out of her. Scared the hell out of us.
Yeah.
But that's the most bizarre call that I can recall anyway.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, it was crazy just to see my, back then your partners, they all had, 15, 18, 20 years on your training officer. So, they're pretty rough and tumble guys.
Pretty salty.
Yeah, salty. But to look over and see him screaming scared the hell out of us.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, that's a pretty funny call in itself. Do you have another call that stands out as a very humorous moment?
Yeah, in July of '84 when the Olympics started, the Summer Olympics, and I had about 3 years on the job, and I took my vacation, and so I was able to work the Olympics during my vacation. So I worked 12-hour shifts for probably 3 weeks straight, and I worked a bunch of different assignments. And one day I'm assigned to the rooftop of one of the dorms in the Olympic Village, and it was at UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles, and they had an Olympic Village there, and then they had one at USC. I was on the rooftop, me and about 5 guys, and we can see the whole campus pretty much, and just for security reasons, we're looking around, and we look over to the next dorm, and here's all these European female athletes, just 10 bodies and everything else, just butt-ass naked, looking at us, waving, going, oh no, I can't believe this.
It's terrible.
It was terrible. I wanted to go in to watch and go home and take a nap.
That's amazing. So that's just, they were totally comfortable letting it all hang out.
When earlier they had to chase them away from the swimming pool because they're all out there sunbathing, and they're saying, no, you can't do that here in California. You got to go put some bathing suits on.
That's great. I mean, that's funny. That's even too much for California,
Yeah, it was a little too much.
Yeah, it reminds me. I had when I first started as a natural resource officer, I was going down the river, and I used to hire summer seasonal help to run the patrol boats. Usually college kids from a maritime academy, And we're driving down the river. It's Bass River in this town of Yarmouth, and over to the right, there's like these 3 college girls on like must have been their grandmother's dock, because big house on the water. And we look over and they're like, Harbor Patrol. They're yelling at us. We're waving. Oh, look, the people love us. All 3 of them pull their shirts up, show their breasts, And out of the house behind them comes this old woman, probably in her in her 80s. Hey.
Don't
quit.
Tell me she showed you her breast.
No.
Okay, good.
Thank God, no. She was screaming at them, quit doing that.
Quit doing that.
And the kid I was training was like, is this what it's always like here? I'm like, you wish. This is...
I just recalled one more intense call if you want to hear it.
Absolutely.
My partner and I were working patrol. I probably had maybe 6 years on the job. And he and I became really good friends. I mean, we worked together for a while. He knew my wife. I knew his wife. We'd go out to dinner and, just got along really well. And this one day I'm driving. He's keeping books. He handles the radio. He he keeps the log, and we got a radio call of shots fired, victim down. Suspect is the victim's husband. They're both in the front yard of their home, and he's standing there with a gun in his hand. So my partner and I start. It was way over on the other side of the divisions. I was working Wilshire Division. So we start going down the street, and my partner, we're going code 3, lights and siren. My partner says, hey, let's cut through Southwest Division. We'll get there quicker. So we're going down Crenshaw. We come up on Washington Boulevard, and there's a guy standing in the middle of the intersection waving his hands, just waving his hands at us. So I had to stop or I'd run him over. And he points to his left, and he said, those guys just robbed my store. And there's 4 guys in a car. They pull into a gas station. All 4 of them jump out, and they all have guns. And they all point them at us, point their guns at my partner and I. And, so we bail out of the car. We take cover. We have our guns drawn, kind of look up. They start running through the gas station into an alley. So we're chasing them, taking cover as we chase them. My partner's broadcasting. 80W on a police officer, 211 suspects, assault with a deadly weapon on a police officer.
211's robbery, right?
Right.
Okay.
They're running through the alley, gave their descriptions, and I'm hugging the wall of the gas station, working my way towards the alley. And he's behind me, and I'm almost ready to turn into the alley. And he says, Dave, let's wait for backup. The people are, backup's coming. Troops are coming, and we can hear the sirens and everything else of all the coppers responding. So, we set up a perimeter. We ended up catching 3 of the 4, and some lady comes down. Her apartment overlooked the alley. She walks over to me, and she said, I'm glad you didn't turn that corner into the alley. I said, why? And she said, the last guy was standing there with his gun at head level, just waiting for you to turn the corner.
Oh.
So I'm going, oh my gosh. So, my partner saved my life.
Yeah.
I could have been gone.
We might not be having this conversation.
Yeah. But we ended up catching 3 of the 4, and they all went to jail for robbery and assault on a police officer. It worked out. But yeah, that was something.
That's spooky.
Yeah, and my voice shakes a little bit when I still talk about it. So crazy.
That's intense, man.
Yeah. But anyway, that's another one. Thanks for letting me share that. Now I like therapy.
Absolutely. I was going to ask you if you could tell us about like the most intense or most frightening call that you responded to.
We were responding to a man with a gun call in Rampart Division, and as we're going there, we started taking shots, and the rounds were hitting the top of the car, just skidding off the roof of our car. So, my partner and I, pull over, we take cover and set up a perimeter and found out what rooftop the shots were coming from. But, the guy was gone. All that was left was a bunch of casings. But the next day, my partner and I are cruising around. I said, hey, let's go down the same street, see what's going on, see if anybody's going to take any more pot shots at us. And he said, hey, that's the streets belong to citizens and us, not the bad guys. Let's go. So we didn't back off. We just cruised around. He always said we had the biggest gang in Los Angeles. Not the bad guys. It's LAPD has the best gang. So
right.
But that's another intense story.
When bullets are bouncing off the top of your car, you can't help but imagine like, is one of these things going to come through and just go right through my head?
Yeah. I mean, all he had to do was aim a little bit lower, and it would have come down on us.
Damn. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I'm just out of curiosity, and people might be interested in it. You said you worked Vice. When
Yes.
you work Vice, there's like you're expected to mix it up a little bit, like go into bars.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That kind of fascinates me. The idea of like having a beer on duty is like really appealing to me.
Yeah, we did work bars. We'd go in and have a beer or two and see if they're serving drunks, obvious intoxicants, if there's B-girls. A lot of the Hispanic bars have girls that, they're called B-girls. What they do is they solicit drinks from the patrons. And they'll say, hey, let's dance. And they'll say, buy me a glass of champagne or whatever, and they get charged double, which is against the law because right after World War II, most of the GIs coming back from the war lost all their money at these bars. So they were all over the United States. So they made them illegal. So
Wow.
we worked gambling, prostitution, and that was the best time I had on the job was working vice. Get to grow your hair, grow a beard,
Yeah, absolutely.
have a couple of beers.
What was the rule like if you're going in like and you're gonna have a cocktail, to kind of obviously to fit in. You're not gonna go in there and
Yes.
get a soda water or something. Were you allowed like one drink an hour or something, or?
You were allowed 2 drinks in an 8-hour shift.
Man, it doesn't seem like enough.
But I know, but what you do is, you have a drink and you order another one and you spill it. You throw it under the bar and then you order another one. And, yeah, or so you tell your supervisor anyway.
I'm picking up what you're putting down there. That's great.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, it was a good time. It was a good time, especially when working street prostitutes and you can get the same one twice. That's always good. That's what all the guys strive for, is try to get the same girl twice, because once you're arrested, you're a cop. But if you can talk your way into getting a violation again, you're the man.
Yeah, or they just have like memories like goldfish. They just don't.
Well, I arrested this one girl for prostitution, and she you work them and they say you're a cop, and I'm saying no, I'll pull over and I'll say, get out of my car, you're a cop. I can't afford to go to jail. And then she'd say, well, would a cop do this? I'm no cop. And she'd lift up her dress and and show you the hardware.
Right.
And I arrested her because I got the violation, the sex for money. And then a couple weeks later, I see her out in the street, and I pull over, and she goes, hey, Officer Escoto, how you doing? And I said, I'm doing good. The last time I saw you, unfortunately, I arrested you, but, when you showed me what you had, I really liked it.
You're kidding me.
She goes, you did? I go, yeah. And she goes, well, can I get in the car? And I go, yeah. And she goes, are you working? And I said, no, I'm off duty. So she gets in and she goes, well, I'm not going to give it to you. How much are you going to pay? And I said, well, how much are you asking? And, and then I got the violation of sex for money. So I give the signal to my partners. They come up and arrest her. And, well, as they're walking up, she looks back, and I said, oh, no, it's internal affairs. They've been following me. She goes, oh, I'll cover you. So when they come up, she goes, oh, officers, some guy just robbed me, and Officer Escoto was just taking me to a safe place. She was covering for me.
Oh, you must have felt like at least a little bit bad.
I felt really bad. I felt like crap, because she, fortunately she was a nice girl, but she was just strung out on crack,
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate how drugs will do this. But,
yeah. Oh my God. I mean, talk about just kind of believing what she wanted to believe. Like,
yeah.
oh yeah, no, I'm off duty. Don't worry about it this time.
Yeah, and her mother came to pick her up, and she's a nice woman, and she's saying, I don't know what to do, and we give her some referrals and stuff, but there's not much you can do, really.
Yeah.
If they don't want the help.
Yeah, you can't force it on them, really.
Yeah. I felt bad, but I felt good. Got her twice.
Right. Dave, I have another question for you. Since you worked a long career and through the 80s and everything, I'm just kind of curious. The media now, the way the media reports on police actions, they seem to, excuse the pun, jump the gun a lot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They kind of just throw things out there and then later don't apologize when it's just clearly was an inflammatory headline made to sell papers and get clicks and downloads, Was it, I mean, I assume that it's been like that forever, right? They were doing that in the 80s and 90s when you were a cop.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they were doing it. It seems like it's more nowadays, but yeah, when people, like friends and family, ask me that question, I just tell them that, you just got to take it in stride. Just, just do your best. If you do the right thing, it's going to work out. And people eventually, they're going to realize that, cops aren't that bad. There are bad cops, I'll admit that.
Of course.
And when I worked in South Central LA, 90 98% of the people will give you the shirts off their back. You know, in the ghettos and everything else. If you need help, they're there to help you. It's that 2, 3, 4% that's bad, and it's same on police departments. You know, there's 3, 4, or 5% that bad cops, but you know, we take pride in policing our own.
Yeah, why should it be any different than any other person?
Right.
You know?
Exactly. And you know that when working backgrounds, and some people get through that shouldn't. You know, it happens, but you know, we police our own. When you're caught, you know, you got to pick a side. You can't live both sides. So.
You had a long career, Dave, and that's amazing. Did you was there anything you did for yourself, for just for your mental health? I mean, because it's 30 years of stress you're dealing with there, and there's a lot of cops that they accrue that, they get that PTSD without even knowing it, because it's unlike war. You're expected to go home and do it the next day. You know, it never ends really. It's your job. Did you do anything specific that helped you out?
What I did is, you know, I had luckily I had a wonderful wife. I have a wonderful wife that, you know, understood my job, and I never ever brought the job home. You know, no, I did my job at work. When I came home, I was a family man. I wasn't a cop anymore.
Okay.
You know, I was just a regular person. But what I've seen, these guys that take it home and they live it 24/7, those are the ones that you know, they pop a gasket.
Yeah, they can't turn it off.
You can't turn it off, and you got to be able to turn it off, and that's a, you know, a stable home life will do that.
Absolutely, I agree 100%.
Yeah. It's you know, one time when I was working homicide, it really threw my head off. It was the doctor said, I even went to see a doctor, and he said I had a chemical imbalance. And what happened is I went to observe an autopsy, and when I walked into the coroner's office, it was so busy they had rows and rows of gurneys with bodies in the hallway. And one of the gurneys had this little arm coming out, you know, and it was the same complexion and same size as my daughter Jillian when she was 5 years old.
Goodness.
And I'm looking at that, and I knew it wasn't Jillian, but I had to go and pull the blanket off and look at the dead body just to make sure it wasn't my daughter. And when it wasn't, and I knew it wasn't, you know, I got really lightheaded, and you know, it was I had to go home.
I can imagine.
I had to have my partner take me home, and ended up going to the doctor, and you know, it was all psychological, but you know, I'm good now.
Sure. There was one of my first law enforcement jobs. There was I got told this story, but they had a real bad drowning with a young kid, you know, like a 6-year-old kid, and the natural resource officer that got the body out of the pond had a 6-year-old son, exact same age. So as the story goes, my coworkers I was working with, he had since moved on to I think he became a sheriff in a southern state, but deputy sheriff. But anyways, he got a real problem. You know, it got in his head, and then he couldn't stop sitting on the edge of his son's bed at night. So he would just go home and sit there, and then it just turned into this problem where he couldn't go to bed. So, I mean, those things get in your head and rattle around. That's bad news.
They do, and you know, you gotta work it out. You gotta realize what it is, and you know, your brain, once you know what it is, and your brain will take care of itself, and you get back to normal.
Yeah, you do the right thing. You go talk to someone. You
right.
Take care of it.
For the longest time, I'd go into our bedroom and just sit in there alone and tell my wife, I just need to be alone, and that was for weeks and weeks, but they got better.
No, that's great. Yeah, because a lot of, unfortunately, it's getting better now, but a lot of coppers they'll just drink. Like they won't go talk to anybody because that's weak. You know, they'll just go drinking with the guys and come home late, and everybody knows how that story ends. You know, it's not good.
And it's not like I came home all the time. I mean, every now and then I'd go and have a drink with the guys. But, you got to do that. But
sure.
But I just didn't bring my work home.
Gotcha.
I just left it there, and it worked out. I made it 30 years.
So, Dave, in those 30 years, do you have a pearl of wisdom that you could put out there for the new recruit, the candidate that's trying to be a police officer, wants it so badly they can taste it? Is there any advice you would give them for becoming a cop?
Just do the right thing. Realize that you can't play both sides. You got to pick and choose a side. If you pick the side of a cop or law enforcement, then that's what you got to live. You got to live and breathe it, on and off duty. And I'm not saying, get rid of your old friends. Because when I did my backgrounds, I remember my background investigator tell me a lot of coppers only associate with other coppers. He said, don't do that. He said, keep your old friends. And your good friends are going to be the ones that, don't smoke a joint in front of you, do this, do that. They're going to respect you. Those are your good friends.
Right.
And he said, and don't get rid of those people. You got to be able to know that there's other life other than law enforcement.
That's great.
Yeah, that's what I even tell recruits, not recruits, but candidates when I talk to them.
That's excellent. So, you're like the third or fourth person I've interviewed that said that exact same thing. So it's
good.
It's got to be true. Absolutely. And I know what you're saying too about picking a side. It's like you were saying before, you can go home and have family time and not be, in cop mode, but you can't go home and go in your basement and smoke a bunch of joints. Like you you gotta if you're gonna enforce the law, you gotta stay true to it. So
yeah, you can't be a hypocrite.
Absolutely, yeah. Dave, I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast, man. Those were some great stories, and I really appreciate you sharing them with us.
Hey, Steve. Thanks, man. I appreciate you you getting a hold of me and letting me do this. This is awesome. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, I'll see you soon.
Sounds good.
All right, brother.
Guys, thank you for hanging with Dave and I. If you've been liking the podcast and you want to show some support for it, the best thing you can do right now is click subscribe. And if you want to go nuts on top of that, you can rate and review it. That's a big help to a new podcast trying to get its legs under it. So I'd appreciate it if you did that. And if you're a law enforcement officer and you want to get a hold of me, or you're interested on going on the show and being interviewed, you can reach me at thingspolicec@gmail.com. thingspolicec@gmail.com. Thank you, and good night.